looking at the Steelers and, really the most talked about quarterback competition in the NFL right now, if it is a competition, some beat reporters have varying opinions on that. But Justin Fields versus Russell Wilson, the constant drumbeat has here actually been in favor of Russell Wilson. I mean, ever since Fields got, traded for back in March, it has been Russell Wilson in pole position as starter. Tomlin even coming out recently and saying, okay, the depth chart was real. Russ is our QB1. Do you think this is a real competition, or what percentage odds I would say would you put our Russ being the week 1 starter? Because as much as the Columbus, Ohio in me and the fantasy guy in me wants Fields to win the job, I still think that in the heart of hearts of Tomlin and Arthur Smith, they probably want Russ, just a steadier veteran hand, to be that guy at least to start the season. But again, it just I'm basing that on just hearing most of them saying throughout the year that it has been Russ. What are your feelings on the situation?
If I had to put a percentage on it, I'd say it's probably like 70% Russ
Okay.
to start week 1. Tomlin, first of all, not reliable on depth chart coach speak, so we can't really hang on to whatever he said. He has said, like you mentioned, that Russell Wilson is in pole position, but he has also stated, yeah, this is absolutely a competition. So if Justin Fields goes out there and really tears it up during the preseason, then there's a possibility that we see him as the starter week 1.
Certainly would be a lot cooler for fantasy. Only Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow have averaged more fantasy points per game than Fields over these past 2 seasons. I mean, look, he's starting to go earlier in these underdog drafts. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where you could actually get Fields in round 18, which was fantastic. But Greg, if we had to look at underdog, players right now and just say who has the best chance of literally, cutting their ADP in half between now and week 1, I think Justin Fields is probably that guy.
Yeah, absolutely he is. If we get word that he's the starter, I mean, he's going to be going in what, the 7th round, 8th round,
I
maybe.
think so.
Man, yeah, right around the CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow area.
That'd be a little aggressive, but it would take 1 week. Like if he turns in a top 5 performance in week 1, then yeah, that's exactly where we're ranking him, as early as week 2. So if Fields does win the job, now let's face it, Russ is still there for the time being. I don't think he'd have the longest leash in the world, but if you had to pick the better up case scenario between the two, Fields these last 2 years, QB5, QB11 in fantasy points per game, Russ, QB18 and QB13. So guys, like Desmond Ridder, one thing I think the entire fantasy community can agree, sucks at football, and he had 6 top 12 finishes last year just by virtue of being a pretty good athlete. And Arthur Smith, say what you want about the guy, does know how to produce a fairly efficient rushing attack. We've seen that more years than not, even in the post, Derrick Henry Falcons era, if you will, over there. So keep an eye on it. But you heard from Greg about a 70% chance that Russ starts. I agree with that speculation for now. Rest of the quarterback battles going on consist of some first-round rookies. We got Drake Maye competing with Jacoby Brissett, J.J. McCarthy behind Sam Darnold for the time being, and Bo Nix out there in Denver, seemingly just against Jarrett Stidham at this point, with all due respect to Zach Wilson. So, Greg, looking at these rookies, again, Maye, McCarthy, and Nix, who do you think winds up spending the most time on the bench?
Well, just to reverse engineer it, I think Bo Nix spends the least time on the bench. He probably ends up starting week 1 or very, very early on. And then it's probably JJ McCarthy that spends the most time on the bench. They brought in Sam Darnold as, very obviously this kind of bridge quarterback. And I just feel like they have more of a structure in place where, Sam Darnold can be more productive and help the team a little more early on than Jacoby Brissett can with the Patriots. So it's just a matter of what are these teams' records after the first 5 or 6 games? If if the Patriots start off 1-4, we might see Drake Maye pretty early there, number 3 overall pick. And then for the Vikings, they have a week 6 bye. They're getting TJ Hawkinson back probably week 7, maybe a little bit earlier, but I feel pretty good that he will be back by week 7. So that would be a pretty nice time to bring in JJ McCarthy if, they're 2-3, or 1-4 or something like that. It's just a matter of, like, when do these coaches feel like these guys are actually ready? Because that's really
Mm.
big for Gerard Mayo and for Kevin O'Connell. They're not going to throw these guys out to the wolves if they feel like they're not ready for NFL action.
Initially, I was thinking it might be May being the one spending the longest on the bench because I had looked at this Vikings, schedule start, and it's literally the Giants. Okay, fine, they can maybe get a win there. But then 49ers, Texans, Packers, and Jets before their week 6 bye. So I'm with you. It would make sense if, again, we see week 7 be the JJ McCarthy start. With Drake Maye, I didn't know if it was, setting up that tough to start the season. And oh yeah, it's actually probably more brutal for the Patriots. They are at the
Yeah.
Bengals week 1, home against the Seahawks, at the Jets, at the 49ers, and then they get to come back home to face the Dolphins and Texans in the first 6 weeks of the season. So honestly, I'd be surprised if we're hitting mid-October and we don't see both of those guys under center. Far more top 10 picks wind up starting at least 10 games as rookies than not. So, yeah, we do have the Patrick Mahomes of the world, but let's face it, that was on a Chiefs team that was still, contending to win the AFC West year in and year out under Alex Smith. Don't exactly think we can compare that to the Patriots and, to a slightly lesser extent, the Vikings as well. So, keep an eye on those. Drake Maye certainly does profile as the most fantasy friendly quarterback of the group. You look at what he did his last 2 years at North Carolina. I mean, 57 rushing yards per game. That's more than what Justin Fields had during his final 2 years at Ohio State. Anthony Richardson of Florida, 59 rushing yards per game. So, not saying that Drake's, rushing ability is going to translate to the next level quite as well as those guys, but certainly someone that with 17 games we could see getting the 300, 400 rushing yards, handful of touchdowns, sure adds up in a hurry in fantasy.